Over the past 2 years, intermittent fasting has completely changed my relationship with food and eating. I've also halved my body fat, going from this to this without making any big changes or sacrifices. Here's why I think intermittent fasting might just be the cheat code that you've been looking for. Whilst fasting as a religious practice has a long history, intermittent fasting for dietary reasons has only really been around since about the 1940s. Laboratory tests on mice discovered that the mice's lifespans could be extended by having them fast intermittently. And since then, there have been a ton of studies establishing the link between intermittent fasting and longevity and lifespan. Unlike other dietary practices, intermittent fasting is based solely around time periods, rather than meal plans, food lists, recipes, and calorie counting. Many people like me practice intermittent fasting to extend their lifespan, to trigger cellular repair and prevent disease, boost their metabolic health, reduce their level of body fat and lose weight, reduce inflammation, improve their ability to tolerate stress, and reduce the likelihood of Alzheimer's disease. The basics of intermittent fasting are really simple. Limit your eating to a set number of hours every day. For instance, you might choose to eat only between noon and 8 p.m. and that's it. There's an increasing amount of interest in intermittent fasting for a few big reasons. With the rise of the celebrity chef, countless TV cookery series, many of us sharing our food choices on social media, and the vast array of choice at the grocery store, our collective awareness about food and nutrition has never been higher. Food documentaries like What the Health, Forks Over Knives, and Cowspiracy have also raised important questions about how our food is produced and the impact our food choices have on our health and also the planet. People are increasingly beginning to question the consequences of their lifestyle choices. Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine, said, "Let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food." To many of us, that now seems more relevant than ever as we begin to understand just how important a healthy lifestyle and good nutrition is for our overall health and disease prevention. This sort of approach could also be part of the answer to rising levels of chronic disease, especially lifestyle-related conditions like type 2 diabetes. There are an ever-growing number of people who've managed to put type 2 diabetes into remission through intermittent fasting, rather than simply rely on medication long-term. There are also some pretty big misconceptions about intermittent fasting. The first is that it's hard and it means depriving or even starving yourself in order to do it, or engaging in some sort of biblical quest where you don't eat for 40 days and 40 nights. No. I eat pretty much all of the same foods that I did before I started fasting, and that also includes pizza and pasta roughly every week or two. So I really haven't made any big changes to the foods that I eat. You can also drink tea and coffee whilst fasting, so long as you don't add milk or cream. You'll end up fainting through hunger or malnourished or looking like a skeleton. Again, not true. I did lose weight through fasting, but it was all very gradual and it was down to fat loss. I've never felt lightheaded or weak whilst fasting, but I've always got the option to break fast early if that were to happen. That intermittent fasting is a diet or it's only useful for weight loss. I personally don't consider intermittent fasting to be a diet, more a lifestyle choice. This is a way of eating that works for me, that doesn't involve any drastic changes or things that aren't sustainable over time. I chose to start intermittent fasting to improve my overall health, prevent disease, and extend my lifespan. If your doctor could offer you a treatment that did all three of those things at no cost, I'm willing to bet that you would be interested. So that's how I view intermittent fasting, as a health protection policy with no setup or ongoing costs. That you'll lose muscle mass or leave yourself weak or unable to work out at the gym. Again, not true. There are tons of studies that establish it is possible to maintain lean muscle mass whilst fasting. Building muscle mass whilst fasting does require a little care to make sure that you're getting the right amount of protein that you need. As for fasting causing weakness, there are a number of studies that also disprove that, with one study showing greater improvements in upper and lower body strength and lower body muscular endurance for a control group who were fasting compared to a group that weren't. And anecdotally, I have been knocking out personal bests month after month at the gym, and so I am quite happy with my level of strength and the way in which I am maintaining and building muscle mass. Okay, so maybe you are sold on the benefits, but you've got some questions about how you practice intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting is all about limiting your eating each day to a set number of hours. Most of you are doing a version of this already, not eating for 10 hours out of every 24. Those 10 probably made up of a couple of hours in the evening before you go to bed and the time you spend asleep, where of course you're not eating. From there, it's really easy to move up to 12-12. So for instance, only eating between 8 AM and 8 PM every day. Then 14-10 and soon enough 16-8. 16-8 is the approach that I've practiced these last 2 years. I typically finish eating somewhere around 7 PM and then I don't start eating again until 11 AM the next day. From there, the next levels up are to move to 18-6 and then 20-4. You can also practice intermittent fasting by consuming a limited number of calories on 1 or 2 days of the week, rather than not eating at all. On those days, you'll consume roughly 15 to 20% of your normal intake. And then for the other days of the week, you'd eat normally. The most well-known version of this is Michael Mosley's 5-2 diet. Another way to practice intermittent fasting is to have 1 day on, 1 day off. This means for 1 day that you'd fast for 24 hours and on the next day you would have 24 hours in which to feed. This is known as alternate day fasting or every other day fasting. Beyond that, you have longer periodic fasts. These typically are water-only fasts that last somewhere between 3 and 7 days. People tend to practice these longer fasts roughly every month or quarter as a way of performing a reset on their body. So what can you do whilst fasting? You can drink as much water as you would like whilst fasting. In fact, water really helps with hunger pangs, as these can often be about dehydration rather than needing to eat food. Most of us have just become conditioned over time that when our stomach starts rumbling, it's a sign to eat, but often it isn't. You can also drink coffee or tea whilst fasting, just without milk or cream, because they would break the fast. There's also some research out there that suggests that caffeine from tea and coffee can accelerate the benefits of intermittent fasting. It doesn't mean that you can't eat certain types of food any longer, but if weight loss is your goal, then there might be some foods that you either want to limit or avoid. As long as you generally eat sensibly, then you'll find that no major changes are needed whilst fasting. Fasting also doesn't mean that you need to tough out your fast no matter what. You get to choose when you break fast, and if you're really not feeling it whilst fasting, then you can give yourself permission to break fast early. I've done exactly that and still do from time to time, as it's my way of making intermittent fasting more enjoyable and sustainable. I don't want to end up feeling miserable through intermittent fasting and then give up on it. Whilst I don't drink alcohol any longer, you can still drink alcohol whilst practicing intermittent fasting, just not when your fast is taking place. There's no set start time with intermittent fasting either, just the one that you choose. If you've got plans one evening, then simply start the fast when you're done. Of course, that means you'll end up breaking fast later than usual the next day, but the total duration of the fast will remain the same, so it shouldn't feel too different. When you break your fast, you can pretty much eat whatever you like. Again, if weight loss is the goal, then you might want to avoid refined carbohydrates when you break your fast, but otherwise, go nuts. I started fasting to prevent disease and extend my lifespan, but I feel like I've got a whole lot more from it than that. Through fasting, my body weight has dropped from 96 kilos down to 80 kilos at its lowest, before I then got it back up again after upping my food intake and beginning to work out. I now weigh 84 kilograms, so overall that's a 12.5% drop in body weight before and after. Most of that change has been down to a significant drop in my level of body fat. I didn't measure this at the outset, but I would estimate that I've gone from somewhere around 22% body fat to about 11%. I've based those figures off the overall change in body weight, and having previously been 12% body fat a few years ago, I feel like I have slightly less on me now. There have been a few unexpected benefits of intermittent fasting for me over the last 2 years. I now find I have fewer decisions to make in the morning. My decisions really are limited to whether I have 1 cup of coffee or 2. To me, that's also way more efficient. It takes me way less time to get ready for the day ahead every morning. Likewise, evenings are simpler. There are fewer decisions to make once I start my fast timer. And I now never end up mindlessly grazing on the sofa watching TV at night. Something that's really easy easy to do and means you're consuming a ton of calories you don't need, which will end up turning into body fat. I've also noticed some sleep improvements. If you eat late, your body will be very busy digesting that food whilst you try and sleep, so consequently you'll sleep less well. Nowadays, my body has done roughly 3 hours of that work before my head even hits the pillow. So I feel like that's led to some improvements in the quality of sleep that I get. I now feel much more stoic in the face of adversity too. When I was still pretty new to intermittent fasting, I would hear this voice inside telling me that I was starving, really hungry, and absolutely had to eat. Now, sometimes that was simply needing a drink of water, but other times it was my mind playing tricks on me. But through repeated fasting practice, I now don't listen to my mind panicking anywhere near as much as I used to. So I feel like I'm calmer and much better able to deal with stresses and strains of any sort. From here, I plan to move up from 16.8 to 18.6, as that feels like the logical next step. I've also read that the disease prevention and longevity benefits compound massively the longer you go beyond 16 hours fasting. For me, the jury is still out on disease prevention and longevity, but I know what the studies say, so I feel really confident that intermittent fasting is helping with both. Now, this is just my experience over the last 2 years. None of this is medical advice. And whether you want to start intermittent fasting or not, it really doesn't matter. But I think we could all gain something from making more intentional choices about what and when we eat. So over to you. What's been your experience with intermittent fasting? If you've yet to try it, has this given you some motivation to check it out? Let me know in the comments if you've got any questions for me, and I will do my best to answer them. That's it for this episode. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.